decision and its potential impact. Philadelphia Police Commissioner Charles Ramsey is the co-chair of the President's Task Force on Policing, which has been working on these issues. And Richard Beary, he's the president of the International Association of Police Chiefs. He's a former police chief of the city of Lake Mary, Florida, and now he's chief of police for the University of Central Florida. And gentlemen, we thank you both. Chief Ramsey, let me start with you. What the president did today was one of really picking up on one of the recommendations that the task force you led have been leading, the recommendations you made. Why is this necessary?
Well, I think it's clearly necessary that we be able to, as police, justify any equipment that we receive, not just from the military, but also using federal grants to get some of the equipment. I mean, obviously we need a broad range of equipment. Police handle everything from missing children to active shooters, and obviously the kind of equipment that you would need to respond effectively varies a great deal. But some military equipment is more appropriate for the field of battle, not the urban streets of our cities.
Chief Beary, you agree that this is the right thing to do to ban access to some kinds of military-style equipment?
I think everyone is looking for a balance. We at the International Association of Chiefs of Police, we understand that we have to have the support of the community, but at the same time, as Chief Ramsey says, law enforcement is dealing with lots of new threats. 20 years ago, who ever heard of an active shooter? Now we hear about it all the time. So we have to make sure that we balance the needs of the public and the safety of the officers and those that are sworn to protect the public, and that's what we're trying to do here.
So Chief Ramsey, how do you think about achieving that balance, and how much of this has to do with equipment, and how much of it has to do with the training of the police themselves, the culture that they work in?
Well, I think most of it has to do with training, but probably the most important aspect of this is policy. At what point in time is it appropriate to deploy certain types of equipment? And there need to be standards in place, policies in place to guide the officers so they have clear direction. And I think that we have seen some instances where certain types of equipment were deployed, in my opinion, at a point in time when it wasn't really necessary, and that's what creates a lot of the problems. So it's training, it's policy, it's all those things combined that I think we need to make sure are in place, and I think that the government is right in seeing to it that we do have those things in place before providing that kind of equipment to an agency.
Chief Ramsey, what's an example of a time and place when it was the wrong thing was used?
Well, when you're talking about mass demonstrations, depending on the crowd, and we're not talking about all-out riots like we saw the first day in Baltimore when things really spiraled out of control, and even later in Ferguson when things spiraled out of control. But when it first started, I know that I was in Washington, D.C., and now Philadelphia. We try to start off without using certain types of equipment. We have them available, but it's certainly out of sight. We don't want to incite a crowd. So I think it's the way in which you deploy, depending on what it is you're responding to and what you're dealing with. And people have a right to protest. And if you show up with riot gear and heavy armored vehicles and so forth when people are out just simply peacefully demonstrating, you're going to get exactly that. You're going to wind up with a riot more than likely.
Chief Beary, same question. How do you strike the right balance? How much of this is the equipment, and how much of it is the training and the approach, the culture of the police force?
Well, a couple of important things come to light. Number one, what we know is that 90% of what law enforcement agencies across this country have received from the military had nothing to do with tanks and guns and things like that. The majority of the equipment that we have received are radios and equipment, things that help us do our job in the community. So I think we need to make sure we understand that. Secondly, is training is absolutely is an essential part to responding to any type of situation. So I agree with Chief Ramsey. It's about training, it's about policy, but it's also about having that just in case you need it, because you just don't know when a crowd is going to go bad. The perfect example was in Waco, Texas yesterday. They certainly didn't expect the shootout that they had there. So it's a real combination, and that's the delicate balance with trying to be a police chief in this country, is to make sure you have your people prepared, you have the equipment that you need, at the same time not coming off like you're trying to intimidate the community that you serve.
Chief Ramsey, I'd like you to respond to that and also address, I mean, how much of a problem do we have in this country right now between police and communities who feel that they are just not understood and not respected by the police?
Well, it depends on the city, the relationships that police and community have. Obviously, there are some areas and some pockets in many of our cities where relationships are strained. That's not necessarily new. I started my policing career in 1968 in Chicago, and we had areas of our city where no one would talk to you, provide information, and so forth. I mean, it was tension between police and community. Now, we've engaged in community policing for the last 3 decades at least, and I think we've done a very, very good job of establishing relationships and also reducing crime. But we have left some communities behind. There still remains some tension, and we need to really be sure that we build bridges, that we close those gaps with those communities as well. And they tend to be communities of color and communities that are challenged in many ways with poverty, lack of educational opportunities of quality and things of that nature. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but the community has to work alongside us. This isn't just a police issue. It takes the community also reaching out to us as we reach out to them.
And Chief Beary, finally, how much of a problem do you think the country has? How much of the country has this kind of a problem that we're talking about? And to what extent do you think banning these so-called militaristic style pieces of equipment will make a difference?
Well, I don't think what the government has banned will have that big of an impact. What our concern is really the stuff that they have, equipment that they've limited, and we're waiting to see how the rules are going to roll out, how we justify the use and things of that nature. Certainly, when it comes to community policing, that is a key part of the solution. However, we know there's a lot of issues going on in our communities, from poverty to mental health issues. There's a host of issues that are going on, and the IACP for over 20 years has called for a national summit on criminal justice, the entire system, and we're hoping that all these things combined will lead to that commission to take a look at the whole system and how we can better handle the delivery of service to our communities and treat our people and men and women who work for us and the citizens with respect. So there's a lot of work ahead. I think it's also important to note that there are a lot of communities across this country that are doing a great job, and law enforcement is doing a great job. There was a Reuters poll that was done in January of this year, and 3/4 of the people that responded to that survey said they have confidence in their local police department. So there's a lot of good things being done across this country. We just need to continue to enhance that and deliver the service that our communities expect.
Chief Richard Beary, who is the president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and Chief Charles Ramsey of Philadelphia. We thank you both.
Thank you.
50 years ago.